I died on a Tuesday, choking on cheap ramen in a roach-infested studio apartment, watching my stepsister accept the Innovation Award on national television. The same award I'd dropped out of the competition for, the same award I'd sacrificed my future for, the same award she'd promised would mean so much more to her than it ever could to me. Victoria stood on that stage in a custom gown, tears streaming down her face as she thanked our parents for their unwavering support and believing in her vision. My vision. My designs, my 3 years of research and development. But I'd withdrawn, like a good daughter, like a good sister. I was 28 years old, dying alone, and my last coherent thought was that I should have been selfish. Then I woke up in my childhood bedroom, 19 years old, with my acceptance letter to the National Innovation Competition clutched in my hand. The letter was dated 6 years ago, 6 years before everything fell apart. 6 years before I became the ghost I died as. I sat up so fast my vision swam. The room was exactly as I'd left it that morning in my first life. Pastel walls I'd begged to repaint. Debate team trophies Mom had never put on display because they weren't feminine. My laptop open to the CAD software where I'd been designing the prototype that would change everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Mom wants you downstairs. Family meeting. I knew what this meeting was about. I remembered it perfectly. In my first life, I'd gone downstairs excited, ready to share the news about the competition. I'd been so naive, so stupidly hopeful that my family would finally see me as something other than the consolation prize my father had brought home when he remarried. This time, I stared at that text message and smiled. This time, I knew exactly what they were going to say, and this time, I had no intention of being a good daughter. I took my time getting ready. In my first life, I'd rushed down in pajamas, too excited to care how I looked. I'd wanted to share my joy. Now I understood that every interaction with my family was a performance, a negotiation, a war. I chose dark jeans and a simple black sweater. I braided my hair. I looked in the mirror at my 19-year-old face, round with baby fat I'd lose during the years of stress and poverty to come, and barely recognized myself. The girl in the mirror had never learned to be hungry, had never sold her laptop for rent money, had never watched the only person who believed in her talent accept an award for stealing it. Not this time, I whispered to my reflection. When I finally walked downstairs, the whole family was assembled in the living room like a tribunal. Dad sat in his usual armchair, pretending to read the newspaper but obviously waiting. Mom perched on the couch, her posture perfect, her expression already set in that disappointed way she'd mastered. And Victoria sprawled on the love seat, her phone in hand, looking bored. My stepsister was beautiful in that effortless way that had always made me feel invisible. Golden hair that fell in perfect waves, wide blue eyes, a smile that made adults melt. At 23, she'd just finished her art degree, a degree my parents had paid for in full while I'd been working 3 jobs to afford community college. Samantha, Mom said, her voice carrying that brittle cheerfulness that meant trouble. Sit down, honey. We need to talk about something important. I remained standing. Is this about the competition? Dad lowered his newspaper, his expression carefully neutral. In my first life, I thought he was trying to be fair. Now I recognized it for what it was, cowardice. He'd already decided which daughter mattered more, and he didn't want to look himself in the eye while he proved it. Your acceptance letter came, he said. Congratulations. Thank you. I kept my voice level, watching them. Mom's smile tightened. We're so proud of you, sweetheart, but we need to discuss something that's come up. Here it comes. Victoria has an opportunity, Mom continued. A wonderful opportunity with the same competition. Really? I looked at my stepsister. I didn't know you were interested in industrial design. Victoria glanced up from her phone, her eyes narrowing slightly. She'd always been able to sense when I was being difficult. I'm interested in innovation. The competition isn't just about design. It's about creative problem solving. My art degree applies perfectly. It didn't. The National Innovation Competition was specifically for engineering and industrial design students. They'd added an interdisciplinary category 2 years ago, but it was still primarily technical. But Victoria wanted in, and what Victoria wanted, Victoria got. The thing is, Dad said, setting down his newspaper, there's been some confusion with the applications. It turns out Victoria applied to the same regional slot as you. Lie number one, the competition had thousands of slots. Regional assignments were based on your location in school, not on some lottery system. Both of you can't compete from the same household, Mom added. It wouldn't look right. Lie number two, I'd read the rules obsessively. There was no prohibition on family members competing. So we were thinking, Dad continued, since Victoria is older, and since this is really her last chance before she ages out of the young innovator category, you want me to drop out? I said it flatly, no question in my voice. Mom's expression shifted to wounded. We're not asking you to drop out, honey. We're asking you to consider what's best for the family. Victoria has been working so hard on her portfolio, and this competition could really launch her career. You're still so young. You'll have other opportunities. I'd had other opportunities. I'd taken none of them because after I'd dropped out of this competition, my life had spiraled. I'd lost my confidence, my momentum, my belief that I deserved good things. I'd spent 6 years in a fog of depression and self-doubt while Victoria built an empire on my sacrifice. She'd won the regional competition, then nationals. The prize had included $50,000 in grant money and automatic admission to a prestigious design incubator in New York. She'd used my research I'd shared with her because I'd been stupid enough to trust family, to create a product that made her a millionaire by 25. And I'd told myself it was fine. That family came first. That her success was my success, even when she stopped returning my calls, even when she moved to Manhattan and forgot I existed, even when I saw her on magazine covers and in TED Talks, selling a vision of innovation that I'd dreamed up in this very house. I'd told myself I'd done the right thing, right up until I died alone, watching her accept an award that should have been mine. No, I said. The room went silent. Mom blinked. Excuse me? I said no, I'm not dropping out. Victoria sat up, finally giving me her full attention. Don't be childish, Sam. This is important. It's important to me, too. You're 19, Mom said, her voice sharpening. You don't understand how the real world works. Victoria needs this opportunity. Then she should have applied to a different competition. Dad stood up, using his full height to loom over me. In my first life, this had been when I'd started crying. I'd never been able to stand up to him. But I'd died once already. What else could he do to me? That's enough, Samantha. We're not asking you. We're telling you. Family takes care of each other. Victoria has been through so much, and this could change her life. Victoria had been through her parents' divorce when she was 16. It had been ugly and public, and Mom had swooped in to play savior, marrying Dad within 6 months and absorbing Victoria into our family like a designer accessory. I'd been 12. I'd wanted a sister. I'd tried so hard to make her like me. It could change my life, too, I said quietly. Don't be dramatic. Mom stood up now, her voice taking on that edge of hysteria that meant she was about to cry. She was excellent at crying. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By being selfish when your sister needs you? My sister, not my stepsister. The distinction was important to Mom. She'd worked hard to pretend we were one big happy family, and any acknowledgement of the reality that I was the first wife's daughter, the reminder of the life Dad had before, was treated as betrayal. If I drop out, I said, I can't reapply for 3 years. That's the rule. By then, I'll have aged out of the young innovator category. So you'll apply in the professional category, Dad said dismissively. This isn't the end of the world. But it had been. The professional category required industry experience I'd never gotten because dropping out of the competition had derailed my education. I'd become so depressed that I'd failed half my classes that semester. I'd lost my scholarship, I'd ended up at a state school, then dropping out entirely, taking whatever jobs I could find to survive. I'm not dropping out, I repeated. Victoria stood up, and for the first time, I saw real anger flash across her perfect face. You know what? Fine, be selfish. But don't come crying to me when you realize you've destroyed this family over some stupid competition. Victoria, Mom gasped. No, I'm done. My stepsister grabbed her purse. I can't believe how immature she's being. After everything we've done for her, after you paid for her car, her insurance, her college applications, I paid for my college applications, I interrupted, with money from my job at the library. We gave you that car, Dad's old Honda with 200,000 miles that broke down every other month. We let you live here rent-free. I'm 19. I'm still in college. That's called being a parent. Victoria's face flushed red. She wasn't used to me talking back. None of them were. I'd been so compliant in my first life, so desperate to be loved and accepted. Samantha, Dad said, his voice low and dangerous. Apologize to your sister. For what? Stating facts? For being disrespectful and selfish. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what I'd been too young to see in my first life. He didn't love me. He'd maybe never loved me. I was the obligation from his first marriage, the child who looked like the wife he'd left, a reminder of his own failure. Victoria was new, shiny, uncomplicated. I'm going to compete, I said. If Victoria wants to compete too, she can apply to a different region or a different competition. There are dozens of them. The innovation competition is the only one that matters, Victoria snapped. Then I guess we both think it matters. Mom stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. She was good at this. The wounded mother routine. How can you do this to us? To her. She's been working on her application for months. So have I for 3 years. You're tearing this family apart. I'm entering a competition. If that tears us apart, we weren't much of a family to begin with. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Dad's face went hard. Get out. I'd expected this. Remembered it even, from some alternate timeline of this conversation my brain had constructed during the years of therapy I'd finally been able to afford at 27. Fine, I turned toward the stairs. Not upstairs, Dad said. Out of this house. If you can't respect this family, you don't deserve to live under this roof. Mom gasped, but she didn't contradict him. Victoria just watched, her arms crossed, her expression satisfied. I looked at the three of them, the family I'd destroyed myself trying to please, and felt nothing but relief. Okay, I said simply. I went upstairs, grabbed my laptop, my portfolio, my research notebooks, and the emergency cash I'd hidden in a tampon box because I'd learned early that privacy didn't exist in this house. $1,500 I'd saved from my library job. I packed one bag of clothes. I left everything else. The debate trophies, the childhood photos, the pretense that this place had ever been home. When I walked back downstairs, they were still in the living room, frozen in their tableau of righteous anger. Sam, Mom said weakly, don't be ridiculous. Your father didn't mean— Yes, he did. I looked at Dad. I'll be back for the rest of my things when you're not home. If you walk out that door, you're on your own, he said. No more money, no more car, no more family. Deal. I walked out. I'd done it, the thing I'd been too scared to do in my first life. I'd chosen myself. And as I stood on the front lawn with one duffel bag and a laptop, watching the sunset over the suburb I'd grown up in, I felt more free than I'd ever felt before I died. I stayed at my friend Mara's apartment that night. Mara had been my only real friend in high school, sharp, cynical, loyal to a fault. In my first life, I'd gradually lost touch with her after dropping out of the competition. I'd been too ashamed to face anyone who'd believed in me. This time, when I showed up at her door at 8 p.m. with a duffel bag and a wild story, she just handed me a beer and pointed me toward her couch. Your family is insane, she said, after I'd given her the abbreviated version. Like, clinically insane. I know. Good, that's progress. She settled cross-legged on the floor across from me. So what's the plan? I'd been thinking about this for hours. In my first life, I'd had no plan. I'd just drifted, letting things happen to me instead of making choices. I need to secure my spot in the competition, I said. Make sure they can't somehow force me out. Can they do that? I don't know, but Victoria has a way of making things happen. That was true in both timelines. My stepsister had a gift for manipulation, for making people want to help her. Okay, so we make sure your position is rock solid. What else? I need money. A job that won't interfere with school and the competition prep. My mom's restaurant is hiring. Night shift, weekends. It's not glamorous, but it pays 10 an hour under the table. Perfect. And housing? I hesitated. This was the scary part. I was hoping I could stay here for a few weeks while I find something. Babe, you can stay as long as you need. My roommate just moved out to live with her girlfriend. You can have her room if you pay half the rent. The relief was so intense it hurt. Mara, don't get mushy on me. I've been telling you for years that your family sucks. I'm just glad you finally see it. The next week was a blur of logistics. I enrolled in classes, contacted my sub-advisor, and sent a formal notification to the innovation competition confirming my participation. I included documentation, my application, my acceptance letter, my school enrollment verification. I also sent a separate email to the competition's ethics board. It was a gamble, but I'd learned in my first life that Victoria wasn't above bending rules. Dear Ethics Committee, I'm writing to inform you that my stepsister, Victoria Hart, application number 45892, may be applying using my residence address and regional assignment. I want to ensure there's no confusion about our separate applications and eligibility. I'm happy to provide proof of residence and family relationships if needed to verify we should be considered separate applicants. Thank you, Samantha Chen. Professional, proactive, the kind of thing a serious competitor would do. 2 days later, I got a response. Dear Ms. Chen, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We've reviewed both applications. Ms. Hart's application listed a New York address where she attends university. There appears to be no conflict. However, we appreciate your diligence. Best of luck in the competition. Interesting. So Victoria had been planning to compete all along. She'd probably assumed I'd drop out like a good sister, leaving her to take over my research and use it as her own. Not this time. I started prepping in earnest. My project was a modular water filtration system designed for disaster relief, portable, affordable, and scalable. I'd been developing it since junior year, refining the design, running simulations. In my first life, Victoria had taken my prototypes and research notes after I'd dropped out. She'd rebranded the concept as an art installation about water scarcity, and eventually spun it into the actual product that made her fortune. She'd had engineers do the real work, of course, but she'd been the face of it, the visionary. This time, I was keeping everything locked down. My research stayed on an encrypted hard drive. My prototypes were stored at Mara's apartment. I told no one the full scope of my project, not even my advisor. Victoria texted me once, "You're really not going to back down?" I didn't respond. Mom called twice, crying about how I was destroying the family. I let it go to voicemail. Dad sent one email. "When you're ready to apologize and act like an adult, you can come home." I deleted it, and I worked. God, I worked. 16-hour days between classes, my restaurant job, and the project. I machine shopped parts, I ran water tests, I documented everything obsessively. The regional competition was in 3 months. The prep phase required submitting a preliminary proposal and technical specifications, then presenting a working prototype at the live event. I submitted my proposal on the deadline, complete with CAD drawings, materials lists, and a budget breakdown. It was solid work, the kind of work I'd been too heartbroken to do properly in my first life. Then I waited. The acceptance email came 2 weeks later. I was one of 50 regional finalists. The competition would be held at the State Convention Center, judged by a panel of engineers and designers from major firms. First prize was admission to the national competition, plus $10,000 in grant money. I should have been excited. Instead, I felt a creeping dread, because I knew what happened next. In my first life, even though I'd dropped out, I'd still followed the competition obsessively. I'd watched the live stream of regionals. I'd seen Victoria present her project, a participatory art installation about climate change that somehow qualified for the technical category. She'd won. The judges had loved her. She'd been charismatic, confident, beautiful. Her presentation had been more TED Talk than technical report, but that had worked in her favor. She'd made them feel things. And she'd used enough of my research, my actual engineering work, to make the project seem technically credible. This time, she couldn't steal my work, but Victoria was adaptable. She'd find another angle. I needed to be ready. 6 weeks before the competition, Mara came home from her shift at the restaurant with a strange look on her face. You're not going to believe who just had dinner with her family at my mom's place. I looked up from my prototype. Who? Victoria? And your parents? And some guy in an expensive suit. My stomach dropped. What were they talking about? I couldn't hear most of it, but I caught bits and pieces. Something about connections and making sure things went smoothly at some event. What kind of event? I don't know, but the suit guy kept mentioning judging panels and regional committees. Mara set down her bag. Sam, it seemed weird. Like shady weird. I sat back, my mind racing. In my first life, I'd never questioned how Victoria had won. I'd assumed she was just that good that I'd overestimated my own abilities. But what if it hadn't been talent? What if it had been rigged? Did you see what restaurant they went to after? They didn't leave. They had dinner at my mom's place. It was the private room in the back, the one we rent out for special events. Can you find out who booked it? Already checked. It was under your dad's name. Listed as a business dinner. Business dinner. 6 weeks before the competition. Mara, I need a favor. Name it. Your mom's restaurant has security cameras, right? She grinned. Oh, I like where this is going. The footage wasn't perfect. The private room wasn't fully covered, but we got enough. Dad, Mom, Victoria, and the man in the suit having an intense conversation over dinner. At one point, Dad slid an envelope across the table. The suit took it, looked inside, nodded. Money changing hands. Who is that guy? Mara asked. I'd been wondering the same thing. I took screenshots of the clearest shots of his face and ran them through. Reverse image search. His name was Gerald Park. He was a VP at Titanium Dynamics, one of the major engineering firms in the state. And according to the Innovation Competition website, he was one of the 5 judges for the regional competition. Holy shit, Mara breathed, looking over my shoulder. They're bribing a judge. Not just bribing. This was systematic. In my first life, Victoria's win hadn't been luck or talent. It had been bought. Everything clicked into place. The way Dad had been so confident I should just give up my spot. The way Victoria had been so sure she'd win. They'd already set up the fix. What are you going to do? Mara asked. In my first life, I would have done nothing. I would have swallowed the injustice, told myself it wasn't worth fighting, let them win. But I'd died once already. I had nothing to lose. I'm going to burn them, I said. I spent the next week gathering evidence. The competition had strict ethics rules. Any attempt to influence judges was grounds for immediate disqualification and a permanent ban from all future competitions. But I needed more than just footage of a dinner. I needed proof of intent, of the explicit agreement. I created a burner email account and sent a message to Gerald Park from a fake address, pretending to be Victoria. Mr. Park, thank you again for our discussion last week. I'm following up on the arrangements we discussed. My father mentioned the first payment was delivered successfully. I wanted to confirm the timeline for ensuring my project receives top consideration during the preliminary review and the live presentation. Please let me know if you need any additional information about my project in advance. Best VH. I held my breath and waited. 3 days later, he responded, Ms. Hart, I'd prefer to keep our communications off email. Your father has my personal number. The arrangements are clear and everything will proceed as discussed. Let's not complicate things with paper trails. Even better than I'd hoped. He'd acknowledged arrangements and mentioned avoiding paper trails. That was consciousness of guilt. I forwarded the email chain to my own secure account, then deleted the burner account entirely. Now I had video footage of money changing hands and an email acknowledging a corrupt arrangement. But I still needed to be strategic about when and how to reveal it. If I went public too early, they'd have time to fabricate a cover story, to paint me as a bitter, vindictive daughter making false accusations. No. I needed to wait for maximum impact. I needed to wait until Victoria had already won. The next 5 weeks were a special kind of torture. I worked on my prototype obsessively, perfecting every detail, knowing it might not matter at all if the judging was rigged. But I couldn't let myself get sloppy. I had to compete as if everything was fair, as if my work alone would be enough. Mara kept me sane. She'd pull me away from my workbench at 2 a.m., force me to eat, remind me that I was doing the right thing. "They're going to crash and burn," she'd say. "You're going to make sure of it." I received one more message from Victoria 2 weeks before the competition. "I heard you're still planning to compete." "That's cute. Good luck, little sister. You're going to need it." The condescension was so perfectly her. In my first life, I would have internalized it, let it feed my self-doubt. This time, I just smiled and saved the message to my evidence folder. The day of the regional competition arrived. The convention center was massive, filled with booths and displays from all 50 finalists. Projects ranged from renewable energy systems to medical devices to infrastructure innovations. The energy was electric. Brilliant young people showing off the work they'd poured themselves into. My booth was in Section C, row 12. I'd set up my water filtration system with explanatory diagrams, technical specifications, and a live demonstration where I'd filter dirty water in real time. Victoria's booth was in Section A, row 3, prime location, near the entrance where judges would see it first. Her project was titled The Watershed, an interactive exploration of water scarcity. It featured a large-scale art installation, suspended transparent spheres filled with water at different levels of contamination, surrounded by screens showing statistics about global water access. It was beautiful, visually stunning, the kind of thing that photographed well and made people feel smart for appreciating it. It was also barely technical. The filtration elements were basic, the engineering superficial. Anyone with real technical knowledge would see through it immediately, unless the judges had been told not to look too closely. I watched from my booth as the preliminary judging began. 5 judges moved through the exhibits in teams of 2 or 3, spending 15 minutes at each booth. They'd score projects on technical merit, innovation, feasibility, and presentation. Gerald Park was on the team that would judge my section. Of course he was. When they reached my booth, I took a deep breath and launched into my presentation. "Thank you for visiting. My project is a modular water filtration system designed for rapid deployment in disaster zones. The key innovation is the scalability. Each unit can process 50 gallons per hour, and units can be linked together to increase capacity without requiring additional power sources." I walked them through the technical specifications, demonstrated the filtration process, showed them my cost analysis. I'd run the numbers 100 times. Each unit could be manufactured for under $200, making it accessible for NGOs and relief organizations. Park barely looked at my project. The other judge, a woman named Dr. Sarah Lynn from Pacific Engineering, asked sharp, probing questions. She seemed genuinely interested. "This is impressive." "Work," Dr. Lynn said, making notes. "Have you tested the filtration efficiency with different contamination types?" "Yes, ma'am. I have data on bacterial, chemical, and sediment contamination. The ceramic filter elements can be locally sourced and replaced, which reduces long-term costs." Park glanced at his watch. "Very nice. Thank you, Ms. Chen." They moved on to the next booth. I watched them work their way through my section, spending roughly the same amount of time at each booth, asking similar questions. Professional. Thorough. Then they reached Victoria's booth in Section A. Even from a distance, I could see the difference. They stayed for nearly 30 minutes, twice as long as any other booth. Park was animated, gesturing, smiling. Victoria held court like a practiced presenter, her body language open and confident. When they finally moved on, Park was still talking to her, laughing at something she'd said. My hands clenched into fists. This was exactly what had happened in my first life. The fix was in. The preliminary judging took all day. Results would be announced at 6 p.m., narrowing the field from 50 finalists to 10 who would present to the full panel the next day. I didn't expect to make the cut, not with Park on the judging team. At 5:45, all the competitors gathered in the main auditorium. The energy was anxious, excited. People had worked for months or years on their projects. This mattered. The competition director, a woman named Helen Morrison, took the stage at exactly 6 p.m. "Thank you all for your incredible work. The judging team was deeply impressed by the quality and innovation on display. This was an exceptionally difficult decision." Standard speech. I'd heard it in my first life via live stream. "I'll be reading the names of our top 10 finalists who will present tomorrow to the full judging panel, in no particular order." She began reading names. Students ran to the stage, hugging each other, crying with relief and joy. Victoria's name was called third. My name wasn't called at all. I sat in the auditorium, surrounded by people celebrating or crying or staring at the stage in shock, and felt nothing but cold certainty. This was exactly what I'd expected. The fix was in, and I'd been cut out in the first round, but I wasn't the girl I'd been in my first life. I wasn't going to go quietly. After the announcement, I walked straight to the competition office, a temporary setup in one of the convention center's conference rooms. I'd like to formally request my scoring breakdown, I told the volunteer at the desk. All competitors will receive feedback via email within 2 weeks. I want it now. It's in the competition rules. Participants have the right to review their preliminary scores within 24 hours of results announcement. The volunteer looked uncomfortable. I'll need to check with the director. Please do. Helen Morrison came out 10 minutes later, looking irritated. Ms. Chen, what's the problem? No problem. I'm exercising my right to review my preliminary scores. We don't typically. It's in the rules. Page 17 of the competition handbook. I can wait while you pull my scoring sheets. She stared at me, clearly trying to determine if I was going to be a problem. Then she sighed. Wait here, she returned with a file folder. You have 15 minutes. You can review them here, but you cannot photograph or remove any documents. I opened the folder. 5 judges had scored my project. 4 had given me high marks, consistently in the 8-9 range out of 10 across all categories. Dr. Lin had even given me a perfect 10 for technical merit. Gerald Park had scored me 3s and 4s across the board. His written comments were dismissive, overly simplistic design, lacks innovation, poor presentation skills. The average score had been just low enough to push me out of the top 10. I memorized the numbers, closed the folder, and handed it back to Morrison. Thank you, I said politely. She looked relieved that I wasn't causing a scene. I know it's disappointing, but, it's fine. I understand completely. I walked out of the office and straight to my car where Mara was waiting. Well, she asked. One judge tanked my scores. Same judge we have on video taking money from my father. So what now? Now we wait for tomorrow. Let Victoria win. Let them think they got away with it. And then? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. And then I make sure everyone knows exactly how she won. The final presentations took place the next day in the main auditorium. 10 finalists, each given 20 minutes to present their project to a panel of 15 judges. The 5 preliminary judges plus 10 additional experts from industry and academia. The auditorium was packed with families, friends, reporters, and industry representatives. This was the prestigious part, the moment that could launch careers. I sat in the audience, 3 rows from the front, my laptop open, my evidence folder ready. Victoria was scheduled to present 7th. I watched the first 6 presentations with half my attention, analyzing the judges' reactions, looking for patterns. Dr. Lin asked tough technical questions of everyone. Park spent most of his time whispering to the other preliminary judges. 2 of the new judges, professors from prestigious universities, seemed genuinely engaged with the work. Then Victoria took the stage. She looked perfect. Designer dress, professional makeup, confident smile. She'd always been good at performing. Thank you for this opportunity, she began, her voice carrying easily through the auditorium. My project, The Watershed, explores the intersection of art, technology, and social consciousness. Water scarcity is one of the defining challenges of our generation, and I believe that innovation must speak not just to the mind, but to the heart. It was a good speech, emotional, visionary, designed to make people feel rather than think critically. She walked them through her installation, the suspended spheres, the visual data displays, the interactive elements that were really just touchscreens showing statistics anyone could have pulled from WHO reports. The filtration component, she said, gesturing to a small display, utilizes a novel ceramic membrane system that can process water at a rate of 20 gallons per hour. I almost laughed. That was my design. Not novel, I'd been developing it for 2 years, and she'd gotten the specifications wrong. My system processed 50 gallons per hour, not 20. The question started. Ms. Hart, one of the new judges asked, "Can you explain the chemical composition of your ceramic membrane?" Victoria hesitated. Just for a second, but I caught it. The membrane is based on a clay polymer composite. The exact ratios are proprietary. What's the micron rating of the filtration? 0.2 microns for bacterial filtration. Wrong. It was 0.1 microns. A critical difference that she wouldn't know because she hadn't actually developed the system. But Park jumped in. The technical specifications are all documented in Ms. Hart's submission. Perhaps we should focus on the broader innovation here, the way this project bridges art and engineering to create public awareness. Rescuing her, steering the conversation away from technical details she couldn't answer. Dr. Lin wasn't having it. With respect, Mr. Park, we're judging technical merit. Ms. Hart, have you tested your filtration system with actual contaminated water sources? Yes, of course. And what was your bacterial reduction rate? Another hesitation. 99.9%. For which bacterial strains specifically? E. coli, primarily. Dr. Lin made a note, her expression skeptical. The presentation continued. Victoria recovered, pivoting back to her emotional appeal, showing a video about communities affected by water scarcity. It was manipulative and effective. When she finished, the applause was warm. She'd won over the crowd, if not all the judges. Park was beaming. Two other preliminary judges looked satisfied. Dr. Lin looked unconvinced, but she was just one vote. The final 3 presentations went by in a blur. I barely registered them. At 5 p.m., the judges retired to deliberate. The audience milled around, networking, speculating about winners. I stayed in my seat, waiting. At 6 p.m., Helen Morrison took the stage again. Thank you all for your patience. This was an incredibly difficult decision. All 10 finalists presented exceptional work. But we can only send one project forward to the national competition. Dramatic pause. The winner of this year's regional innovation competition is Victoria Hart for The Watershed. The applause was thunderous. Victoria ran to the stage, tears streaming down her face, hugging Morrison. My parents stood up in the back clapping and cheering. Dad had his phone out, recording everything. This was the moment. This was when they thought they'd won. I opened my laptop and connected to the convention center's public Wi-Fi. I'd prepared everything in advance. A folder containing the security footage, the email exchange with Gerald Park, Victoria's technical specifications that matched my own work too perfectly to be coincidence, and a detailed timeline showing that she'd only begun developing her project after I'd been pushed to drop out. I'd also prepared a list of email addresses, the competition's ethics board, the local news media, the engineering firms represented on the judging panel, and the universities of every judge in attendance. I wrote one email. To whom it may concern, I'm writing to report evidence of corruption in the regional innovation competition. Attached, please find video evidence showing Judge Gerald Park, Titanium Dynamics, accepting payment from Victoria Hart's family 6 weeks prior to the competition, email correspondence acknowledging arrangements to ensure favorable scoring, and technical analysis showing substantial overlap between Ms. Hart's winning project and my own preliminary work, which she had access to as my stepsister. I urge you to investigate this matter before Ms. Hart represents this region at nationals. Best regards, Samantha Chen. I attached all the files. I hit send, then I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked out of the auditorium while my stepsister stood on stage holding her winner's certificate, believing she'd gotten away with it. The email hit at 6:08 p.m. By 6:30, my phone was ringing. Competition officials, my advisor, Mara, who I'd warned to expect chaos. I didn't answer any of them. I went back to my booth, began packing up my project, and waited. At 7:15, security guards arrived to escort Gerald Park out of the building. He went quietly, his face ashen. At 7:45, Helen Morrison made an emergency announcement that the results were being reviewed due to irregularities in the judging process. At 8:30, my parents and Victoria were called into a private meeting with competition officials. I continued packing my equipment, methodical and calm. Dr. Sarah Lynn found me at my booth at 9 p.m. Ms. Chen, she said quietly. May I speak with you? Of course. What you submitted to the ethics board, is it all verified? Every piece. I can provide the original security footage, metadata on the emails, and testimony from the restaurant owner who witnessed the meeting. She nodded slowly. The board is meeting an emergency session tonight. This is extremely serious. I know. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I needed proof, and I needed to see if they'd actually go through with it. I met her eyes. In the preliminary round, Mr. Park gave me scores of 3 and 4, while 4 other judges gave me 8s and 9s. That's not a difference of opinion. That's sabotage. I saw your project, Dr. Lin said. It was excellent work. Some of the best technical design in the entire competition. Thank you. The board will likely void the results and conduct a full investigation. This could take weeks. I understand. She hesitated. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Corruption like this damages everyone who competes honestly. After she left, I finished packing. My phone kept buzzing. Messages, calls, emails. I ignored all of it. Until one text came through from a number I didn't recognize. You stupid, vindictive bitch. You've destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. Victoria. I typed back. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I blocked the number and went home. The investigation took 3 weeks. In that time, the story exploded. Local news picked it up first. Cheating scandal rocks innovation competition. Then regional outlets. Then national tech blogs. The evidence I'd provided was damning. Gerald Park was fired from Titanium Dynamics and banned from ever serving as a competition judge again. The other preliminary judges who'd scored suspiciously in Victoria's favor were investigated, though nothing conclusive was found against them. Victoria's win was officially revoked. Her project was disqualified, and she was banned from any future innovation competitions for life. The competition board issued a formal apology and announced they'd be restructuring their ethics oversight. My parents tried calling dozens of times. I never answered. Eventually, they sent a lawyer's letter threatening to sue me for defamation. I sent back copies of all my evidence and a note from my own lawyer, Mara's uncle, who worked pro bono cases, pointing out that truth is an absolute defense against defamation and that they should probably consult with criminal counsel about the bribery charges that might be forthcoming. The threatening letters stopped. The competition board offered me a formal apology and invited me to present at a special session to replace the voided regional finals. I declined. I competed honestly, I told Helen Morrison on the phone. My project was good enough. I don't need a pity win. This wouldn't be a pity win, Ms. Chen. The board reviewed all the preliminary scores. With Mr. Park's scores removed from consideration, you would have placed second overall, easily within the top 10 for finals. What happened to the finalist who placed 10th after the recalculation? He would be elevated to finalist status. Then elevate him. He earned it. Morrison was silent for a moment. You're an unusual person, Ms. Chen. I just want to compete fairly. I understand, but for the record, Dr. Lin and 3 other judges have asked to write letters of recommendation for you. They were very impressed with your work. That actually meant something. Thank you. I'd appreciate that. There's one more thing. The National Competition Board has been following this situation. They've extended a special invitation for you to compete at nationals directly, bypassing regionals. I sat up straighter. What? It's within their discretion to invite exceptional projects, especially under extenuating circumstances. They feel you were unjustly eliminated from proper regional consideration. If you're interested, the spot is yours. Nationals, the thing I'd given up in my first life. The thing Victoria had used as her launching pad to steal my future. Yes, I said, I'm very interested. I had 6 weeks to prepare for nationals. The competition would be in San Francisco, hosted by a coalition of major tech companies, 200 competitors from across the country. The top 5 would receive grant money, mentorship, and entry into a prestigious accelerator program. I upgraded my prototype, incorporating feedback from Dr. Lin and the other judges who'd reviewed my work. I ran more tests, refined my presentation, prepared for every possible technical question. Mara helped me practice. "You need to be less modest," she said, after one run-through. "You keep saying, 'I hope' and 'I think.' Just state facts. You're brilliant. Act like it." That feels arrogant. It's not arrogant if it's true. These people are competing for the same thing you are. They're not going to be humble. Why should you? She was right. In my first life, I'd been so afraid of seeming boastful that I'd made myself invisible. I practiced projecting confidence, making declarative statements, owning my expertise. It felt like wearing someone else's skin at first. But gradually I realized this wasn't fake. I did know my project better than anyone else. I had done the work. I deserved to be proud of it. 2 weeks before nationals, I got a call from an unknown San Francisco number. "Ms. Chen, this is David Torres from Cascade Ventures." Cascade was one of the largest venture capital firms in the country, specializing in social impact startups. "Hello," I said cautiously. "I've been following the innovation competition situation. Your project caught my attention, the water filtration system. That's exactly the kind of solution we're looking to support. Would you be open to a conversation?" Yes, of course." "Excellent. I'll be at Nationals as a sponsor. Let's schedule a meeting." After I hung up, I just sat there, staring at my phone. This was happening. Actually happening. In my first life, I'd been so beaten down by dropping out that I'd never pursued my ideas, never believed I deserved to be taken seriously. This time, the world was opening up. Nationals was held in a massive convention center in downtown San Francisco. The energy was different from regionals, sharper, more intense. Everyone here was the best from their region. Everyone was hungry. I saw Victoria exactly once, at a distance, with my parents in the lobby. She looked thin, exhausted, defeated. Mom was crying. Dad looked furious. I felt nothing looking at them. No anger, no satisfaction, just nothing. They were strangers who'd briefly occupied space in my life. I walked past them without acknowledging they existed. My project was assigned to the engineering innovation track, 200 competitors divided into 5 tracks. I'd present on the second day, giving me time to watch other presentations and gauge the competition. The caliber of work was extraordinary. A girl from Massachusetts had developed a new prosthetic interface. A team from Texas had created a solar panel design that increased efficiency by 30%. A boy from Oregon had built an AI system for early wildfire detection. These were legitimately brilliant people with legitimately brilliant ideas. I loved it. This was what competition should be. Excellence pushing against excellence. My presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. on day 2. I'd practiced it so many times I could recite it in my sleep. When my name was called, I walked to the main stage in the engineering hall, looked out at an audience of hundreds, and smiled. "Thank you. My name is Samantha Chen, and I've developed a modular water filtration system for rapid deployment in disaster zones." I walked them through everything: the technical specifications, the cost analysis, the field testing data I'd gathered. I showed videos of the system in action, filtering contaminated water from local sources. I answered questions with precision and confidence. When a judge challenged my bacterial reduction rates, I pulled up raw data from third-party lab testing. When another asked about scalability, I walked through my manufacturing plan, showing exactly how the system could be produced at scale for under $200 per unit. I was good. I knew I was good. When I finished, the applause was warm and sustained. Dr. Lin was in the audience. She caught my eye and nodded. I'd done it. I'd competed on my terms, with my work, and I'd held my own against the best in the country. The results were announced on the final evening in a ceremony attended by tech executives, venture capitalists, and journalists. 200 competitors had been narrowed to 20 finalists and then to 5 winners. Fifth place, the solar panel team from Texas, $10,000 grant. Fourth place, the prosthetic interface from Massachusetts, $15,000 grant. Third place, the wildfire detection system from Oregon, $25,000 grant. Second place, a water desalination project from Florida, $50,000 grant. And first place, Samantha Chen for her modular disaster relief water filtration system. Ms. Chen will receive a $100,000 development grant and admission to the Cascade Impact Accelerator program. I walked to the stage in a daze. The weight of it hit me all at once, not just the money or the program, but the recognition. The proof that I'd been right about myself, right to fight, right to refuse to disappear. David Torres from Cascade Ventures was on stage, shaking my hand, saying something congratulatory. Cameras flashed, people applauded. And for the first time since I'd woken up 6 months ago with a second chance at my life, I let myself cry. Not from sadness, from relief, from joy. From the sheer fucking triumph of not just surviving, but winning. The aftermath was a blur of interviews, meetings, and opportunities. Cascade Ventures wanted to help me develop the filtration system into a commercial product. A documentary crew asked to follow my journey. My university offered me a full scholarship and a research position. Dr. Lin became my mentor. We met monthly to discuss technical development and strategy. She introduced me to other engineers, opened doors I'd never known existed. Mara quit her restaurant job and became my business manager. Someone needs to make sure you don't get screwed on contracts, she said. Might as well be me. I hired a lawyer, an accountant, a patent agent. I filed provisional patents on my designs. I started building a team. 6 months after nationals, my first manufacturing run completed. 50 units, shipped to a relief organization working in Haiti after hurricane damage. The units worked, the data came back positive. Relief workers sent photos of communities with clean water access for the first time in months. That's when it really hit me. I was actually doing it. The thing I'd dreamed about in my first life but never believed I could achieve. I was making a difference. I never spoke to my parents or Victoria again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Victoria tried to launch an art career, but the scandal had poisoned her reputation. No one wanted to work with the girl who'd cheated and been caught. She moved to another state, changed her name on social media, tried to start over. My parents tried to reach out twice, once through a lawyer, once through my university. Both times I refused contact. They'd made their choice clear when they picked her over me. I owed them nothing. Some people told me I should forgive them, that I was being harsh, that family was important. Those people had never been forced to choose between themselves and someone else's comfort. I didn't forgive them, I simply moved on. Built a life so full and rich and successful that they became irrelevant. 2 years after nationals, I was invited to give a keynote at the Innovation Competition's 10th anniversary event. I stood on the same stage where I'd been eliminated, where I'd watched Victoria accept an award she'd stolen, and looked out at 200 young competitors. I'm not here to tell you a story about how hard work always pays off, I began, because that's not always true. Sometimes people cheat. Sometimes the system is rigged. Sometimes the people who should support you will try to tear you down. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the inspirational talk they'd expected. But I am here to tell you that your worth isn't determined by corrupt judges or rigged competitions. It's not determined by people who don't believe in you. It's determined by whether you believe in yourself enough to keep going when everything tells you to quit. I told them about being eliminated from regionals, about discovering the bribery, about making the choice to expose it, even though it would destroy my family relationships. Some people will tell you that family comes first, that you should sacrifice your dreams for others, that being a good person means being compliant and quiet. But here's what I learned. The people who love you don't ask you to make yourself smaller. They don't ask you to give up your future for their convenience. I saw some people nodding. Others looked uncomfortable. So, if you find yourself in a situation where you're being asked to sacrifice your dreams for someone else's comfort, I want you to ask yourself, would they do the same for me? And if the answer is no, then you have your answer about what you should do. After the keynote, Dr. Lin found me backstage. That was quite a speech. Too harsh? No, honest. Some people needed to hear it. Some people needed to hear that it's okay to choose yourself. Exactly. We stood there quietly for a moment. You know, Derlin said, when you were eliminated from regionals, I almost quit the judging panel. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have proof. I felt complicit. You scored me fairly. You asked real questions. But I didn't fight hard enough. I didn't push back when Park was obviously sabotaging you. You couldn't have known for sure. I suspected. That should have been enough. She looked at me seriously. What you did, gathering evidence, exposing the corruption, refusing to let them get away with it, that took real courage. Most people would have just accepted the loss. I did accept the loss in my first... I stopped myself. What? Nothing. I just mean, I've learned that accepting injustice doesn't make you noble. It just makes you complicit in your own erasure. 5 years after my rebirth, my company, Clean Flow Systems, had deployed water filtration units in 43 countries. We'd provided clean water access to over 2 million people. I was 29 years old. I had wealth, recognition, and impact. I'd been featured in Forbes, TED, and the Harvard Business Review. I'd built the life I'd been meant to have all along. One day, I got a LinkedIn message from Victoria. Sam, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize. What I did was unforgivable. I was young and arrogant, and I let mom and dad manipulate me into thinking I deserved your work. I've been in therapy for years trying to unpack all of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see now how wrong I was. You deserved better. I'm sorry. I read it 3 times. In my first life, I would have been desperate for this apology. I would have taken it as validation, as proof that I'd been right to feel hurt. But now I just felt tired. I typed back, I appreciate the apology. I hope you found peace, but I've moved on, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. Take care of yourself. I blocked her after sending it. Mara asked me later if I felt guilty about not accepting the olive branch. No, I said honestly. She hurt me because it was convenient. She's apologizing because she feels guilty, not because she actually cares about making amends. Real amends would be taking responsibility publicly, not sending a private message that makes her feel better. You've gotten cynical. I've gotten realistic. Fair enough. You want Thai food? Always. That's the thing they don't tell you about revenge. It's not actually about the other person. It's about refusing to let their choices define your life. I didn't destroy Victoria because I hated her. I destroyed her because she tried to destroy me first, and I refused to disappear quietly. In my first life, I'd been so afraid of being selfish that I'd let everyone take from me until there was nothing left. I'd died alone and forgotten, a cautionary tale about people who don't fight for themselves. In this life, I fought. I was ruthless when I needed to be. I protected my work, my dreams, my future with claws and teeth, and I won. Not just the competition, not just the business, but the right to exist on my own terms, unapologetic and undiminished. 10 years after the competition, I received an invitation to speak at the National Engineering Honors Gala. The event recognized lifetime achievement in innovation and social impact. Dr. Sarah Lynn was being inducted. David Torres was receiving a philanthropy award, and I was being honored as Innovator of the Decade. I brought Mara as my date. She'd been with me through everything, the dark nights, the hard decisions, the moments when I'd almost given up. Can you believe this? She whispered as we walked the red carpet. Little Samantha Chen, who showed up at my apartment with one duffel bag and a dream. I had more than a dream. I had rage and spite. The best motivators. We laughed because it was funny, because we'd survived, because we'd won. At the ceremony, they showed a montage of my work. The competition, the company, the communities transformed by access to clean water. They interviewed people whose lives had changed because of clean flow systems. A woman in Kenya said, "Before the filters came, my children were always sick. Now they are healthy. Now they can go to school." A relief worker in the Philippines said, This technology saved lives after the typhoon. We could deploy it immediately, and it worked perfectly. An engineer in Haiti said, Ms. Chen's design is genius in its simplicity. It's exactly what we needed. When I took the stage to accept the award, I looked out at an audience of the most accomplished engineers and innovators in the country and felt the weight of how far I'd come. When I was 19 years old, I almost gave up on my dreams because someone told me they mattered less than keeping the peace. I almost sacrificed my future for someone else's convenience, and if I had, none of this would exist. I gestured to the screen showing images of CleanFlow's work. 2 million people have clean water because I refused to disappear. Because I chose to be selfish in the best possible way, by believing my dreams mattered enough to fight for. I looked directly at the camera. So, if you're out there right now in a situation where someone is asking you to make yourself smaller, to give up your dreams, to sacrifice your future for their comfort, I want you to know that you don't owe them that. You don't owe anyone your silence or your surrender. The applause started then, building to a standing ovation. But I wasn't done. And if you're someone who's been wronged, who's had their work stolen or their dreams crushed by people who should have protected you, I want you to know that your story isn't over. Mine wasn't. You can come back from betrayal. You can rebuild. You can win. But only if you refuse to let them make you disappear. After the ceremony, journalists wanted interviews. Industry leaders wanted meetings. Young engineers wanted advice. I gave them all the same message. Fight for yourself. No one else will. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat on the balcony looking out at the San Francisco skyline, the city where I'd won nationals, where I'd started building my company, where I'd transformed from a broken girl into someone who couldn't be broken anymore. My phone buzzed, an email from the innovation competition. Ms. Chen, we're reaching out because Victoria Hart has applied to have her lifetime ban from our competitions lifted. As the person who filed the original ethics complaint, you have the right to submit a statement regarding this request. Please let us know if you'd like to provide input. Best regards. I stared at the email for a long moment. Then I typed back. My original complaint stands. The evidence was clear. My statement is that people who cheat don't deserve second chances in systems built on merit. Deny the request. Best, Samantha Chen. I hit send and deleted the email. Victoria had made her choices. She'd tried to steal my future, and when that failed, she'd had a decade to rebuild her own life honestly. Whether she had or hadn't wasn't my problem. I'd spent 10 years building something beautiful and meaningful. I'd helped millions of people. I'd proved that the girl they'd tried to erase mattered more than any of them had ever imagined. That was my revenge. Not that Victoria had lost, though she had. Not that my parents had to watch my success from a distance, though they did. My revenge was simpler and more complete than that. I'd won. I'd won everything they'd tried to take from me, and I'd done it on my terms with my work, through my choices. I was free, successful, fulfilled, and they were nothing more than footnotes in the origin story of someone who refused to stay down. I closed my laptop, finished my wine, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I had a meeting with the UN about deploying CleanFlow systems in refugee camps. I had a life to live, work to do, impact to make. I had a future that was entirely, unapologetically mine, and that was the best revenge of all.